Hello and welcome to ILTV's Elections Arena. I'm Aaron Porras, and today in the ring, the Central Elections Committee has now unanimously voted to endorse the final results of the March 2nd elections, and President Rivlin has officially scheduled his meetings with party leaders for their recommendations for Prime Minister. The question now is who has the numbers? Well, joining us to discuss is political analyst and chairman of the Zionist Foundation, Zohar Tal, and columnist for Newsweek and editor of HistoryCentral.com, Mark Schulman. Thank you both so much for being with us today. It's going to be a fun show. I already know. I'm predicting. All right. So, Blue and White Chairman Benny Gantz and Israel Beitenu Chairman Avigdor Lieberman are working to build a minority government or a coalition with less than the 61 required mandates, but with outside support from the Joint Arab List, which until now both Gantz and Lieberman have ruled out. But they now say that anything is on the table as long as it's to prevent fourth elections and to get rid of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Not everyone is on board just yet, though. Blue and White MKs Tzvi Hauser and Yoaz Hendel are rejecting this proposition so far, and they're now facing an ultimatum from their party. Get in line or get out. So, I actually want to start with you, Mark. Do you think that they're going to toe the party line, or will the Blue and White Party be losing two members soon?
I don't know. I know Tzvi Hauser pretty well. He's a neighbor. So I don't really know what he's going to do. I know he'll have to move out of Tel Aviv if he decides not to follow the blue and white line.
We had a very low voter turnout. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
If they'll,
all I know is
he's
in our neighborhood of dog owners, when she's a dog owner, I don't know. We have some pretty mean dogs, and I don't know what will happen if he decides not. If he decides not to. I think in the end, they will either toe the line or they'll resign. I can't be sure of that. What people don't understand, their hatred for Netanyahu is as strong as everybody else, as more than the average person in blue and white.
So you don't see any way that their defection could mean a cross?
No, they're not going to go across.
Neither in or nothing.
Neither are going to go. They left because of their hatred of Netanyahu, as Bogi Ya'alon did. They both consider Netanyahu a danger to the country. And that's why they left. I mean, they don't have a lot of... Ideologically, they're Likud. There's no question about it. They just have both worked closely with Netanyahu, saw what was going on, understood what that meant, the same way Bogi Ya'alon came to that same conclusion. And so I don't see them making that... I can see them resigning. I could see them not going along with the blue and white decision, which would bring us to a fourth election. But I cannot see them going to the other side and voting for Netanyahu to form a government.
Yeah, well, both of them are currently the champions of the right wing in Israel for the last 24 hours. I assume they enjoyed that position. To which direction
would it be enough to overdo their hatred for Netanyahu?
I don't know, but you started by saying that Gantz and Lieberman met and they want to prevent fourth election. Actually, whenever they say we want to prevent fourth election, you can change that sentence into throwing away Netanyahu, which is the real intention. So whenever they want to supposedly prevent the elections, they actually want to do anything they can in order to kick Netanyahu out, and they don't care, as far as I can see, about anything else.
Well, so I want to get into Lieberman's positions, especially a little bit more deeply today. But first, both Gantz and Netanyahu, again, up until very recently, have said consistently, we will not create a government that relies on support from the Joint Arab List. So are they doing right by their constituents?
Remember what they said. They can't keep. They made three promises. They can't keep all three.
Exactly.
The three promises. No,
but that's it. So are they keeping their promises to the electorate?
No, excuse
me.
They have to break some promise. They had three promises they made. They promised no fourth election, no sitting in with Netanyahu, and no using the Joint List as support from the outside. Now, those three things, they cannot make all those three promises. They have to make a decision. Which of the three promises are they going to go back on?
Now, excuse
me, but the reality is, when was the last time you heard a politician go back on a promise? I mean, the only thing I think that Lieberman has ever said that's absolutely correct is don't believe a word a politician ever says.
Well, there are two things about that. First of all, I think that it is inconceivable that a major promise to the electorate, which is not to sit or not to use the votes of the Arab list in order to form a government, is going to be thrown away. It's not just a minor promise. And the second thing is, my kids are relatively old, but I remember when they were young, I taught them not to promise anything that you can't keep. Obviously, any of these cockpit, the way they call it, haven't learned that lesson.
I don't think
or
that,
maybe they learned that lesson,
I don't think
and they choose to forget it.
I don't think there's a politician I've ever run into. Maybe Honest Abe Lincoln. I don't know who who's kept all his promises. I mean, let's be honest. Politicians make promises. We need to take every one of their promises with just a little bit of grain of salt. I mean, whether they're American Democrats or Republicans or whether they're Israelis, there's almost no politician that keeps all of his promises.
So I think yes,
they're
point,
all three. I have to
how
admit,
will their constituents react? Because that's an important question.
I don't look. Supposedly, 30 to 40% of the constituents were opposed to it, but 80%. No, excuse me, 100% of the constituents were opposed to going in with Netanyahu, and I don't know, 60%, 70% are against the fourth election. So where do you make the trade-offs? You have a trade-off here. Look, you have two things have come about right now. One is a once-in-a-lifetime, from their perspective or some people's perspective, of doing this, making a joint coalition with the Arabs. And for Lieberman, he has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What he wanted in terms of state and religion are these are things that I certainly agree with, that here's a once-in-a-lifetime chance of doing, because Likud will never do it, because Likud cannot break its long-term relationship with the Haredim.
Mark, it's incorrect to say that Gantz has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, because he had a real opportunity on the previous elections. He could have been prime minister by now, or in a week or so, or something like that. He could have been prime minister already, but he chose not to. Now, these four guys, Gantz and Ya'alon and Ashkenazi and Yair Lapid, they were considered Mr. Clean. I don't know how to say it. They were very clean. They were not considered as politicians, etc. But they've made it very clear that you can't believe in them any more than you can believe in anyone else, either Avigdor Lieberman or Netanyahu or anyone else, as you say, because they promise something and right the next day they change it.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about some of the policies, because you talked about how they're in a unique position now to maybe pass some of the things that in a Netanyahu government they would not be able to do. So the current government, though, such as it is, if a minority government were to pass, where are their policies? Because they don't share that much in common.
No, first of all, the issue of religion and state, the Arabs will agree to Lieberman's set of demands, because it doesn't affect them very much. The ability of having civil.
Sure.
Well, okay, but those are things that Lieberman wants.
But what are the Arab Party's demands? And
the Arab Party's demands, from what I understand, there were 4 demands, what I read recently. The 4 demands were going, removing a law that has to do with building in the Arab sector, something Likud has also sort of promised to do at this point.
The nation-state bill as well.
The nation-state bill modifying that. The Blue and White Party has agreed to do that. Additional funds for special education in the Arab sector. And no transfer of the triangle, the Arabs in the triangle, which is something that Netanyahu also agreed to.
So that's something pretty much everyone agrees
the 4
on.
things that they've asked for officially. I don't know what else they've asked for privately.
So that's
it's time to pop this bubble saying that, okay, we can sit with the Arabs because they want things that are good for everyone. Obviously, anything which is a civil agenda is okay. Likud government have invested tons of money in the Arab community during the last 4 or 5 years. So that's not an issue. The question is this. If you form a government and 15 minutes after the government is sworn in, Hamas fires missiles over to Ashkelon, what will the government do, knowing that it needs the Arab votes? And I have to say something. Ahmed Tibi is considered moderate within this faction, the Arab faction. He's considered moderate. He was an advisor to PLO leader and arch-terrorist Yasser Arafat. So he is not the worst within this party. How can anyone guarantee the protection of the security interests of Israel with this government?
Okay, let's just stop.
And that's the question that not just I'm asking. Most of most of the Israeli public, including blue-white voters, are asking that question.
That's a falsehood. It's a false statement. Why? Because the reality is they vote for the party. They're not talking about putting a coalition with them. They're talking about them supporting from the outside. All they need to do is vote for the new government and pass a budget. And then there's nothing that can make the government fall. The government is not dependent on them Because the only thing that can make a government fall in this country.
No, but how do you know that they will
where does
really
Blue and
not-
White then get the 61 majority support
For what?
For their policy, for whatever policies it is that they have.
But these policies everyone agrees to. Which policies are you concerned about? In other words, you
No,
don't
well,
need.
he just wanted-
Excuse me. You don't need 61 votes to go to war in this country. Unfortunately, the parliament doesn't vote to go to war.
My
it's
point
a
is
decision of the
that-
security
my
cabinet.
point is
you
very
don't need
simple.
them once you have the election, and once Netanyahu is no longer in Balfour, Likud.
So
we'll
does
find a new
Blue, so
leader.
does Blue and
Well,
White, does Blue and White, the Israel Beitenu party, the Labor Gesher Meretz, and the joint list, do they share everything in common then,
No,
policy-wise?
of course not. But
So that's the thing. So
no,
where
but
do
share-
they differ?
Okay, but look, let's understand something. This country has always had two main issues that separate us. I mean, there are other small issues, obviously, too. But there's state and religion, and there's the security issues. The security issues are not about to be solved anytime soon. Let's be quite honest. The world is not ready. The Arab world is not ready. We're not ready. We've been in a state of stasis, so to speak, where nothing is happening. Trump is about to go into an election period. The coronavirus is going to turn total havoc into the American elections. His chance of being reelected, if this continues the way it's going, becomes smaller and smaller every day. So the reality is nothing is going to happen on the security side in terms of peace or war and peace, where there's a disagreement between the right and left in this country, which all comes down to how much land to give up or not give up. The other issue of religion and civil religion, there's no problem with the Arab parties. There's no problem with what they believe in.
No, but the point is very simple. Look, you said that the agenda, the civil agenda, is something that the Arabs are ready to vote for, and Blue-White are ready to give them. The question is, what about security issues?
But
don't they have anything they want to ask Blue-White to do in terms of security? I don't think so.
And one more thing. To get money from Qatar? Is that what they wanted to ask for?
Given that Gantz just lied to his whole electorate, how can anyone trust when he says these are their demands, period, and they will not demand anything with regard to the Gaza Strip, with regard to Iran, with regard to West Bank, with regard to anything like that?
I have no idea what additional agreements they may want or not want. But I can tell you, what are they going to want? More money from Qatar? We should do less than they want? Let's be honest.
Well, but even now, given the current kind of backpedaling here when it comes to the joint list and including them as outside support, even now, Gantz is excluding Balad, which is 3 party votes from the joint list, which makes a big difference. I mean, that makes or breaks his coalition, especially if Hendel is.
He needs Balad of Hendel and
if they drop out, then he absolutely.
Balad, but it's not clear that that's happening. We don't know what's. Listen, honestly, we have no idea what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. Let's be quite honest. We don't even know whether Rivlin will say, "I can't give the mandate to Netanyahu because he's been indicted." There are so many gray areas ahead of us right now that we're heading into total gray area in the middle of one of the biggest crises we've all faced, and has nothing to do with politics. So I mean, we mix it all together and we're in soup, gray soup that we have absolutely no idea where we're going to come out of, to be quite honest with you. And anyone who can predict it, go right ahead, predict the stock market too, because I'll put my money. If you can predict what's going to happen in this country politically
and the
over the next 6 weeks, good luck.
So,
yeah, well, I think obviously anyone can agree that the idea of fourth election is not far-fetched. It can happen, and it's a reasonable scenario given the status that we're in. I think that Blue and White and Lieberman will try to do their best not to get to fourth election, because I think in this case, given what they have done so far and their willingness to go and form a government with the Arab party, will make them suffer, and the electorate will not forgive them. I think they are about to shrink if there is a fourth elections, while the right wing and Likud, even with the indictment, with the trial, with Netanyahu in a critical position from his point of view, still Likud and right wing will grow should there be a fourth election.
They can very simply pass a law in the next couple of weeks that basically says that someone who's been indicted cannot run as head of a party list.
What are the chances that they actually...
That will not happen.
Not a problem.
That will not
happen. I'm speaking logistically.
Well, there's no problem logistically doing it, because they will replace Yuri Edelstein as the Speaker of the Knesset. They'll bring all the vadot, all the committees of the Knesset to work, which they should do anyway.
And this is without a government in place.
Right, you don't need that to do the government. But they should do that anyway. Leave everything aside. We need all of the committees of the Knesset working right now because we've had an interim government now for a year, and we need some sort of parliamentary supervision, responsibility, etc. They'll put all those committees to work. They can then pass a law. If they have 62 votes for that, and Handel and House will certainly go along with that, if they have 62 votes for that, they'll pass that law. And it's not retroactive. In other words, if they said he can't do it now, they might have some legal problems. But if they're saying he can't do it in the future, what? Is Ayelet Shaked going to go to the Supreme Court and say that the parliament is not supreme after going through the last 3 years screaming the parliament is supreme?
It hasn't been done before in a way that a random majority cannot enforce something that is so constitutional on the state.
Based on what? Based on what they can't do.
Based on the democratic history of this state.
What democratic history of the state would not allow 62 members of the Knesset to vote for something? I'm sorry, there's 62.
They're not even a coalition.
So what? 62, 62.
There hasn't been any public debate on such a thing.
They can have a debate.
And it has never been done before.
So
Does this in any way change basic law? Does it? Would that change basic law?
They have to change a basic law.
They pass a basic law.
So my question is, because basic laws are a little bit more tricky than...
No, they're not. That's one of the problems in this country is our basic laws are a joke because our basic laws only have to be passed by 61 votes.
So it's a joke when it's convenient, but it's not a joke when you want to get a goal.
I think the basic
to reach a goal of getting Netanyahu out of office.
I think the basic laws are a joke altogether, and I think we need a real constitution, but we don't have one. Okay. And a real constitution would never allow him to run now because he's been indicted.
So maybe if they care so much about the constitution of this state, instead of throwing Netanyahu out, they can form the committees and start working on the constitution.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, very likely. Ben Gurion was afraid of doing that. I'm sure someone else is really capable of doing it right now. I blame everything on Ben Gurion, but that's besides the point.
So they can do whatever they want, but they cannot come later and say, "Oh yes, we're so democratic, we're so constitutional, we're so good at that." No. But Netanyahu and right wing, they are not that good.
But there's nothing undemocratic about passing a law that says someone indicted for crimes should not be able to run as for prime minister. I think it's pretty simple. Anywhere else in the world it probably exists. Any place else in the world, Netanyahu would have long ago resigned. Long ago resigned. I can't think of a country other than an absolute dictatorship. When absolute dictatorship wouldn't be indicted. So we have this funny situation. But there's no country in the world where...
There's only one small detail, and that is that Netanyahu and Likud party gained 36 seats in this Knesset, knowing that Netanyahu is going to trial.
Seats. Okay, so
what do you make of that? What do you think the opinion of the public about Netanyahu and about his primaryship?
So some people have the wrong idea. But what does that have to do with anything?
All right,
they happen to be the voters. They happen to be the electorate.
But that's the majority. 62 people, 62 seats voted against Netanyahu.
Well, so I want to look at that right now because there are reports that the Likud is preparing for a fourth election early, that they don't have the numbers and that they're already preparing for another campaign season. What might that look like? Because again, as we've seen the trends, now that we can actually study trends because we're in after the third election, the right has slowly been gaining.
No, it hasn't. It lost. It had one.
It lost in April.
It lost. It went down. It went down the election after that, and went up this election. I mean, there's no trends. There's a line that looks like this.
No, there have been seats that have been shifting around, and you're right. You're right in terms of the Likud personally kind of shifting down and then back up. But
I think what are you talking about? The right the first time had 60 without Lieberman. Then it got 55. Now it has 58. So you can't say it's gone up and down. It's not we can't call it a trend.
Well,
he may be right.
No, Likud is currently...
Lieberman also went down. Consistently.
Likud
he went up and then back down.
He went down in April. In April it went up, and then it was a little bit down in September and a little bit down.
No, it was up in September and down in April. He had the least in the first election. He had more the second election.
And now he's going down.
Now he's going down.
While Likud is going up. Blue-white are going down.
That was that election.
And making the Knesset a charade will not gain them any votes in their electorate because the major Jewish electorate doesn't like these games.
So how do you see a fourth election turn out?
Listen.
I mean, of course, it's a preposterous, very far away speculative question.
Does this have? Is the
what
coronavirus over by then or not? I mean, we're really talking. We're talking in worlds we just don't know. Look. Netanyahu wants to stay in power as prime minister. Interim prime minister is really good for him because it's really interim. We've never had something like this. I mean, you talk about we've never had anything like this before. We've never close this. We never went to 2 elections in a row. We're even talking about
Definitely
4 elections in a row. I mean, and the only reason we're talking about 4 elections in a row is because he won't resign. Let's be honest. If he was to resign tomorrow morning, there'd be a coalition between Blue and White and Likud tomorrow morning, with Likud having the first prime minister, mind you. Tomorrow morning there'll be such a coalition.
Well, do you think it's fair? What are you saying that we can? Do you think it's fair to blame Netanyahu for the
Definitely not. Obviously, if Likud or if left wing, including Arabs, including Lieberman, including anyone, could have so easily formed a government, it would have been done already. First elections, it was 60-60. Both sides lacked only one in order to form a government. But now it's 58 for Likud, for right wing, which are closer to building a bloc, a homogeneous bloc, let's say. But I think fourth election will gain the right wing, which is eventually larger than the left wing, the 61 votes that are required in order to form a government. And as I said previously,
where do you think those extra seats will come from? Who do you think will lose?
Blue, White, and Lieberman, definitely. Blue, White, and Lieberman will lose. Lieberman will lose mandates to the right wing. Blue and White will probably lose mandates to Labour Party, Meretz, or whatever constellation will be there. Because I think the public trust is now lower. Specifically for Benny Gantz. I mean, he started as some kind of a Prince Charming, and now he doesn't look that much of a prince or that much charming.
Netanyahu sent through to him, and the private investigators and the claims about his phone. Likud did so many things wrong in this election we won't even go into. Who knows? Look, I would not sit here and say that I have any clue what's going to happen in a fourth election. I won't say the word fourth. Well, I just said it. But to talk about a fourth election is totally absurd. I mean,
I think we probably all would have agreed that talking about, as you said earlier, talking about fourth elections was only absurd until now.
Yeah.
So we really don't know. But unfortunately, that's the end of the speculation today. That's all the time that we have in the elections arena. I'd like to thank our guests, Mark Schulman and Zohar Tal, for joining us. And thanks to all of you, of course, for tuning in. Also, remember that for more news from ILTV, please follow us on Facebook, like us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Aaron Porras. See you next time.